All right, let's put the women and children to bed and go looking for dinner. John Rothstein here on Inside College Basketball Now. I want to remind you to subscribe to Inside College Basketball Now on both Apple and Spotify. We want to be your Bible for the college basketball season and beyond. We are the only college basketball podcast coming to you 52 weeks out of the calendar year. Also want to remind you to like and subscribe to Inside College Basketball Now on YouTube. We want to get up to 500 likes on this show. And in addition to the like button, we want to remind you to hit the hype button so we can spread the word on Inside College Basketball Now from coast to coast like butter and toast. We want you to subscribe on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. And also a programming note, Inside College Basketball Now will be here on CBS Sports Network moving forward at 1 o'clock Eastern on Mondays. And if you can't be with us live during the offseason at 1 o'clock Eastern on Mondays, be sure to catch us during your early morning workout or during your commute home on Apple or Spotify. We need an army with us for each and every show here on Inside College Basketball Now, and we need you to be all you can be. And in addition to the shows we will be bringing to you on Mondays, we also want to remind you that Inside College Basketball Now will be bringing you additional episodes featuring exclusive interviews with some of the biggest and best names in the sport. Later today, I will have a chat with Michigan head coach Dusty May. You will also hear part of that interview later in this hour. But as always now, we are going to start with a new focus in the offseason. And there's going to be different storylines that come to the forefront. There's going to be different things, obviously, moving forward that we are going to cover as topics emerge. But the number one thing, obviously, on the forefront of college basketball is what's going on with the transfer portal. And as you can see right here, this is a tweet that I put out a couple of days ago, and it's a public service announcement. Not every commitment during transfer portal season should be classified as a great get. High volume in the transfer portal does not guarantee a large number of wins for the following year. The four teams that played in the Final Four, UConn, Illinois, Arizona, Michigan, all retained at least four key players from the prior season, and that's why retention is greater than addition. So I know that social media might be overflowing with different graphics, different videos, different edits, different commitments. The most important thing for the best teams in college basketball is going to be the players that are retained in that program. But one thing that has been a common theme that I have gathered from talking to coaches and agents and industry sources over the last week since the transfer portal has opened. The dollar right now that it costs to get a top-tier player in the transfer portal is exponentially more than it was just a couple years ago. I remember covering 2 years ago in 2024 an all-conference caliber player, one of the best guards in his league, transferring to another school. And the number that I heard that player got is now 4 times more 2 years later in 2026. So inflation is real for high-end talent, and inflation, as we've always seen across any walk of life, is not something that tends to go down. This is a big-time business now in college sports, and that is being reflected by the amount of money that these players are making. And a lot of times in life, and especially college sports, we go back to what we grew up with, and that is the idea that if you have a great role, if you have high usage, and if you play at a brand name program, more than likely you are going to return to that school and be part of that rich tradition. Any logic that you had obviously to lean on all goes out the window when it comes to the transfer portal era and obviously the name, image, and likeness era, because we have seen great players have high usage and quality production and be at very tradition-rich programs, and a lot of those players have left for greener pastures elsewhere, and that's fine. That is taking advantage of the system, and the system is obviously right now set up to benefit those who have the highest possible ceiling to obviously amplify their monetary value. So what am I hearing right now on the open market as it comes to college basketball? Well, it's time now to dive into what I call portal combat. And this is some of the stuff that I'm hearing right now on the open market. We are going to start with the top guard in the transfer portal, and that is Wisconsin's John Blackwell. Now, John Blackwell announced last week, in the latter part of the week, that he was considering 6 schools. He's also somebody, again, who is going through the NBA draft process. Duke, UCLA, Illinois, Arizona, Alabama, and Louisville. Now, according to a lot of people close to the situation, there was a strong belief that Duke and Illinois were the 2 schools that had the best chance to secure the services of John Blackwell. On Sunday, Illinois got a commitment from Providence transfer Stefan Vox, a 6'7" combo guard with great ball skills, similar in mold to a player that could fill the void left behind by Keaton Wagler, who announced over the weekend that he's going to the NBA. That makes me think, obviously, that things could be different moving forward for Illinois in their pursuit of John Blackwell after the commitment of Stefan Vox. Now, I look at Duke, and I know Duke is obviously one of the sport's few remaining blue bloods, but I'm looking at Duke's roster. There's Caleb Foster, there's Caden Boozer, and there's also Deron Rippey. These are 3 guys right now who are obviously point guard-centric players and players that are going to want to play with the ball. So I'm curious how John Blackwell would fit into that equation if he indeed obviously explored a route to Duke. The other teams on this list, Arizona, Alabama, Louisville. Louisville is obviously going to be searching for players to play along Jackson Shelstad and Flory Badunga, who announced their commitments from Oregon and Kansas, respectively, on Sunday. So John Blackwell is a guy, obviously, is at the top of the priority board for a lot of schools as the best guard in the portal. He will enter next season as a preseason All-American. UCLA, a team that's listed on this list, is going to get an official visit from John Blackwell on Tuesday. John Blackwell is in a situation where, for all intents and purposes, he will be in a scenario where he will command top dollar on the market. He is also in a situation where he is now going to visit UCLA on Tuesday. The Bruins have retained Trent Perry, who should be an all Big Ten caliber player, as a junior in UCLA. And UCLA also got a commitment from Jalen Petty from Texas Tech on Sunday night. So UCLA is definitely in the market for a third guard and another perimeter player to complement Perry and Petty. That 3-guard lineup last year really paid dividends for UCLA down the stretch of the season with Donovan Dent, Sky Clark, and also Trent Perry. So you have to wonder if that is what the pitch is going to be for Mick Cronin and company. But John Blackwell visiting UCLA on Tuesday. The 6 schools, again, Duke, UCLA, Illinois, Arizona, Alabama, and Louisville. Illinois getting commitment Sunday from Stefan Vox. So this is a fluid situation, but John Blackwell, the Wisconsin transfer, will visit UCLA coming up on Tuesday. The second name on this list I want to get into is BYU transfer Rob Wright. Now, I reported on Sunday afternoon that Rob Wright is going to visit Kentucky on Monday. Rob Wright is somebody who loved his time at BYU, who obviously loved his opportunity to run the show in Provo. From what I have gathered, BYU and Rob Wright were apart on the number for him to return to Provo. Other schools during that time, such as Villanova and St. John's, called about Rob Wright, kicked the tires. But as of Sunday, things really picked up for Kentucky. Kentucky is also going to host Teron Stokes on an official visit today, the top player in the 2026 class. So Teron Stokes and Rob Wright will be visiting Kentucky on Monday. This is a huge recruiting day for Mark Pope. Mark Pope in Kentucky right now ranked outside the top 30 of my Rothstein 45. Obviously, a player like Rob Wright would potentially be a magnet for other players to join him in Lexington. That is a big thing to monitor. We will monitor that. But Rob Wright, the BYU transfer, one of the top players in the portal, going to visit Kentucky today, in addition to Teron Stokes, the top player in the 2026 class. Now, third name on this list, Virginia Tech transfer Neoklis Avdalas. Now, according to a source last week, I was told the following schools were in play for Neo Avdalas: Texas, Florida State, Kentucky, North Carolina, St. John's, Arkansas, Oklahoma State. Now, here's what I can tell you. Neo Avdalas is going to a place that is going to allow him to have the basketball in his hands and be a primary playmaker and a primary initiator of the offense. We saw glimpses of it this past year at Virginia Tech. We didn't see it, obviously, consistently at an all-ACC or all-American caliber level. Looking at the list that I just gave you, I'm looking at, obviously, people that he would want to play with in terms of a supporting cast. Texas just took Isaiah Johnson from Colorado, a really, really good player. So I would think that takes Texas out of the mix. Kentucky is obviously a team that is recruiting Rob Wright. If Kentucky takes Rob Wright, I would not expect Neo Avdalas to be there. Rick Pitino obviously is still searching to upgrade the point guard position. Dylan Darling is still there, but you would think St. John's wants to upgrade that spot. And also North Carolina under Michael Malone needs to have a playmaker at the most important position on the floor. Derek Dixon, the starter last year in the transfer portal, still no word. Arkansas, obviously a program that has a lot of talented guards. He would have a bevy of options to play with. So I would expect Neo Avdalas, who will not be taking any official visits, to make a number of key decisions this week in terms of weeding out the process. I would think, without question, I would say North Carolina, St. John's, Arkansas, all schools to monitor in this situation. Want to give a shout out as well to Texas and Sean Miller, who had a great weekend in the transfer portal, getting Isaiah Johnson from Colorado and David Punch to TCU. I have Texas right now at number 9 in the Rothstein 45. Some information now on a couple of guys real quick. 2 transfers out of Notre Dame, Jalen Haralson and Markus Burton. Keep an eye on Indiana for Markus Burton. For Jalen Haralson, he is down to 3 schools: Tennessee, North Carolina, and Ohio State. Had a really good freshman year last year for the Irish. 2 other guys where I have some information on. KJ Lewis from Georgetown is going to set up a visit to USC. And also UConn transfer Eric Ryba, who shocked everybody by putting his name in the portal last week. He is somebody, again, who I think we need to keep an eye on at USC. I've heard his name mentioned with USC. He obviously has a connection to Rodney Rice. Some other things to keep an eye on the transfer portal watch. Nick Hamenia, who played his freshman season at Duke, is going to be Zooming with a couple of teams. He's not going to be taking any official visits. Gonzaga and UCLA recruited him heavily out of high school. UCLA obviously has Trent Perry, his former high school teammate, on the roster. He is also coming from the same high school as Johnny Juzang, Harvard Westlake, coached by a great head coach in Dave Rabibo. Texas and Louisville also in the mix there. And there's also a couple of other stay or go decisions to monitor really, really closely. Braylon Mullins from UConn is going to take some time this week to gather with his family to obviously see what the next steps would be for him. He would be one of the best players in college basketball if he returned. And also a key decision to keep an eye on is Florida's Tommy Hauck. Tommy Hauck is somebody, again, who could be a player who could return to college basketball and make significantly more money than he would if he was drafted in the first round of the NBA. If Florida, who got a commitment last week from Denzel Aberdeen, who was a part of Florida's team in 2025 when the Gators won a national championship, if Florida was in a situation where it got Tommy Hauck back and could start Boogie Fland, Denzel Aberdeen if he got a waiver, and Tommy Hauck on the perimeter, and then you got back Alex Condon and Ruben Chinyelu, the Gators would unequivocally be the top team entering the 26-27 season, and it wouldn't even be close. Now, the top team in 2026 was Michigan. Their head coach, Dusty May, will join us coming up next right here on Inside College Basketball Now with John Rothstein on CBS Sports Network. All All right, John Rothstein back here on Inside College Basketball Now on CBS Sports Network. Earlier, I had a chance to catch up with Michigan head coach Dusty May just 7 days after the Wolverines won the national championship. Welcome back to Inside College Basketball Now with John Rothstein. Pleased to be joined by Michigan head coach Dusty May 7 days after winning a national championship. Dusty, welcome. How would you describe the last week?
Hectic and just nonstop.
Do you feel any different as a head coach now that you've won a national championship?
Not at all, John. I was hoping that I would.
Why don't you feel any different?
Just because you have to get to the next thing. You know, we talk a lot about that. And if we have a chance to compete in Detroit next year in the Final Four, then these next couple weeks are pivotal. And so there's no time to waste.
I understand that. I hear that, especially in this climate of college basketball. But you wrap up the game last Monday against UConn, probably about 11:30 Eastern local time. Was there any window or period of time that you got to soak everything in before you started to think about the 26-27 season?
Well, it's always the moments in the locker room with the staff, with the players, when we walk back together as a staff, where we're just kind of reflecting on what happened and telling funny stories. And we laugh and joke a lot when we're not locked in. Other than that, as soon as we got back to the hotel, you have plans to enjoy it a little bit, but between shaking hands and kissing babies, it's actually more work. So then we landed the next day and got back after it.
Now, I asked you about this, a couple of years ago, and I'm really fascinated by it now. You were so stoic when you went to the Final Four in 2023 with Florida Atlantic when you beat Kansas State. And I was watching you closely last Monday to see if there was going to be any reaction when you won the national championship. And still, you moved along like you just won a bye game in the middle of November. How did you win a national championship and still show no emotion?
John, I don't know. I mean, I know that I'm off a little bit. I get really excited in practice for certain plays, or I get really excited when a player chooses to not go in the portal. And so I think just the day-to-day, the process gives me so much more excitement than the end. It's almost like you're just sad that it's over, and now you have to turn the page to something else, because that group last year was unbelievable to be around every day, just to watch them interact with each other, to see their relationships grow throughout, and to see them meet each other in the middle. It was special.
Did the national title mean more because it came against a program like UConn?
I think so. I mean, we felt like they'd had their time. I mean, we look at the run that they've had the last couple of years. It's like nothing since the Wooden days. But we just felt like everything that we had went through, we had tried to prepare ourselves with the toughest schedule in America. We finished number one. We obviously going through the Big Ten slate like we did, we felt like we were prepared to make this run. And so we were just determined to never fear failure, to never let off the gas, just to keep going. And I think when you've trained yourself just to keep going for so long, it just becomes a habit. And then when it ends, you still the only thing you can think about is just keep going, because you've been so well trained.
Dusty, you look at your season, and obviously in the middle of November, you guys really just became a runaway train from the rest of the sport. Looking back, is it still remarkable how this team just flipped the switch after the road win at TCU by a couple of points?
It is, and now looking back, it's not as remarkable as it seemed at the time, because we were on the verge, and the first couple games, we made a lot of errors. Coach and I had a saying that the dumb loses more than smart wins, and we just made a lot of mental errors, and we felt like we just cleaned those things up, we would be significantly better by snapping our finger. And I remember after TCU game, Coach Fraschilla did our game, and we were talking about our team, and he said, "I like your pieces." And I said, "No, Coach, we're going to be really, really good. I believe that. Even now, it doesn't look like it." I said, "I have no idea when, but at some point, we're going to be a really good basketball team." And it just happened to be about 3 days later.
And obviously that culminated with a great run in the NCAA tournament. When you were winning games by such a large margin, were you concerned going into the UConn game that you hadn't obviously dealt with a tight game scenario in the final minutes?
Not necessarily. We've been really good in late game situations. Much like our team last year, we just had a different gear where we felt like we had to win it with rebounding, with offensive rebounding, with loose basketballs, and simply just finding ways to win. It was never as if we had anyone trying to be the hero or trying to save us. It was just a group that could elevate their play the last 4 or 5 minutes of games. And because of that, we always had confidence that we were going to step up whenever it was needed.
So you look forward now, as you said, you started looking forward right after the end of the UConn game last Monday night. Obviously, there's been some public declarations of retention from Michigan. We're still waiting to see the plans of a couple of other players, too notably Adai Mara, Marez Johnson. Is there any updates on what their plans will be for the upcoming season?
No, not at all. They're still gathering information and trying to make their decision. We anticipate that both of them are going to have a great option to be first-round draft picks, and so they're just weighing the pros and cons of both and what they want to do as people.
So as things are 50-50 maybe with two players of that ilk, how do you proceed then and plan for next season without full clarity between two guys, obviously, who were integral parts of a team that just won the national title?
John, that's the difficult thing with balancing this right now, with the portal decisions being made so quickly and then those guys not having final decisions. Mm-hmm. They're very transparent with what their thought process is. We have a good idea of what it's going to look like, but you can never say 100% with certainty.
What is it like to be a head coach in this climate right now over these next couple of weeks and maybe a month?
It's exhilarating and horrible wrapped up into one. There's a lot of highs and lows every single minute. Just things change drastically. Every decision you make could cause a chain reaction for 3 other decisions. So it's, you really, you get these opportunities to do things to promote your program. And I've just told everyone I can't commit to anything right now because our lives change hourly. Even where we're traveling, who we're going to see, who we're bringing in, what's the timetable for this? What's the timetable for this? So it's a juggling act. But once again, it's terrible now. But once we have a team, once we have a roster, then it becomes awesome overnight.
Dusty, you referenced obviously 2 players, Adai Mara, Marez Johnson, who could have an opportunity to be first-round picks. Now with the way things are structured in college basketball with name, image, and likeness, and obviously those types of opportunities, players can earn more if they're one of the best players in college basketball as a star in college basketball versus maybe a mid to late first-round pick. If you can present that to a player of that caliber, how do you then pitch that player if financially you can do better at Michigan versus maybe being in the NBA?
To be honest, John, I don't pitch it at all. I lay out the information without any emotion because I have a lot of incentive to convince them to come back. And I want it to be their decision. Just like as parents, we want to develop our children as independent thinkers and problem solvers and decision makers. So it's the same thing. Obviously, I want them both to come back. We could make it work, but I'm more concerned with what they want to do with their future and their careers. And if they're both gone, I'm going to be rooting like heck. The only thing we're going to ask for is a couple of tickets when they play the Pistons. But if they're here, I'd feel a lot better about our squad and our continuity. But we're here to support those guys. We coach basketball, so I don't get too emotional on those personnel decisions. We're going to support them with whatever they decide.
Dusty, it's interesting in looking at your team. Obviously, people expected Yaxel Lendeborg to be one of the best players in the country, and he was. But a lot of the guys that you brought into the fold a year ago, Mara, Johnson, Elliott Cadeau, had not even come close to peaking at their previous stops. Obviously, there were moments of promise. Adai Mara played really well the last month or so when he was at UCLA. But was that part of the plan to get guys on the way up that maybe weren't finished products when you were putting this team together?
Yeah, John, even now we're trying to find guys that we believe are extremely undervalued or underutilized and trying to add those guys to the equation versus just going after the guys that are established as the best players. But we also believe that habits and behaviors are very, very contagious on a daily basis. And when you have a foundation of guys who are going to sacrifice, who are going to work extremely hard, who are going to support their teammates, and they have a desire to do it together, then that rubs off on whoever you bring in. And the opposite can be true as well. If we have guys that are self-centered, that are not great teammates, then those behaviors become contagious as well.
Welcome back to Inside College Basketball Now on CBS Sports Network with John Rothstein. Moving forward during the offseason, each and every week we are going to talk with several of the new coaches who were hired in the past month. Today we caught up with Cincinnati head coach Jerrod Calhoun, and I asked the new head coach what he's going to do to get Cincinnati college basketball back on track. Welcome back to Inside College Basketball Now with John Rothstein. Pleased to be joined by newly minted Cincinnati head coach Jerrod Calhoun. And Jerrod, welcome. What was your first memory of Cincinnati basketball?
You know, it's probably just the sold-out crowds, John, the student section, just the excitement in Third Arena. Those games as a student assistant and watching the Bearcats over the years, it was exciting. It was just a great brand of basketball.
Now, Jerrod, when you were a student assistant at Cincinnati, did you ever allow yourself to dream about one day being the head coach of the Bearcats?
You know, not really, John. I think you take it day by day. Obviously, this is a surreal moment for me. You know, it's 21 years later or whatever it is. But I think you just, put your head down, you work, you try to get better at each stop. And, this just happened to happen. And we're living in the moment. As you say, we sleep in May. We've been going 100 miles an hour, but it's been exciting.
What was Cincinnati basketball like during that time when you were first obviously becoming part of the program as a student?
Just learning, right? I think anytime you get into the business at a young age, you take everything in, right? You're watching what do coaches do at shoot-arounds? What do they do at practice? I thought the best thing that Coach Huggins did was he empowered his assistant coaches, right? Guys like Dan Peters and Andy Kennedy and, that staff. I thought Huggs did an unbelievable job. And one thing that people don't talk about enough is this coaching tree, right?
Yeah.
Like I talked with you about that. And, it's pretty impressive. He's got 3 former assistants that have all coached in a Final Four, right? And that's because he trained those guys how to run a program.
What are the biggest things you learned under Coach Huggins as you were obviously trying to craft your own career in coaching?
Yeah, I thought he had a great line. You have to be everyday guys, right? You can't waste days. You have to be an everyday guy, whether you're on the staff, whether you're a manager, whether you're a player, right? I mean, I think that's what the great programs have. They have an identity on both sides, but they have a work ethic.
Jerrod, you were somebody obviously who was born and bred in the Midwest, and then you took obviously your coaching career out to Utah, and you had a couple of great years at Utah State. How much did that broaden your perspective just coaching in a different area of the country?
Yeah, it was great. I mean, guys like, Brian Dutcher, Leon Rice, Ali at Colorado State, Sundance Wicks, the different environments, right? Expanding your recruiting base, right? Understanding what the West Coast brings. And, it was just a tremendous basketball league. It really was. And I met a lot of great coaches and have a lot of respect for those programs.
How much did obviously your style of play a major role in the success that you had at Utah State?
Yeah, I mean, we have a clear identity on both sides. At Utah State, we implemented our fist defense, right, which is really a switching man-to-man. Everybody thinks it's a zone, and just really trying to do some different things with the ball screen, and then offensively being efficient. If you look at our numbers, really over the last 4 or 5 years, we've modernized our basketball, right? Obviously, my relationship with Joe Mazzulla, we want to be very modern, right, at all 5 positions, from point guard to 5. We want to play a modern style, a free-flowing style of basketball. And I think kids like to play that way, and it'll attract really good players that are skilled and get them ready for the next level.
Other than Joe Mazzulla, who do you patent your coaching style after?
Honestly, I don't really patent it after anybody, John. What I've done over the 15 years is try to get better each day. I've got a tremendous staff, guys that I love being around, guys that make me better, and just try to grow. I don't really, I study the game, but I want to be who I am, and I think that's what the great ones do.
Jerrod, in hindsight right now, aside from obviously your style of play, aside from obviously having great players, why do you think you were so successful these past 2 years at Utah State?
I think relationships, John. I think that's a great question. You have to study other people's success, program success, what makes each program go, right? I mean, I think that's what everybody strives for, whether you're in coaching or running a business. To me, it's all about relationships. It's all about communication. It's all about role identity, and then getting the right people moving in the right direction. I think we've done a really good job of that. We've empowered our players, and we do a lot of things that are very intentional inside our program on a daily basis.
So you win 28 games at Utah State. You told me before the season, I think we need to win 25 just to make the NCAA tournament. You win 28 and you're in an 8-9 game. How much did that seed after winning 28 games put off, obviously, a light bulb in your head that if I can make a move, it's time to make the move?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was the final chapter, right? It was, you're supposed to be excited, right? You're supposed to really be ready to play in an NCAA tournament and feel that with your team. And, it was ridiculous, quite honest with you, to win 28 games, win the regular season, win the tournament. Really good on both sides of the ball and get a 9 seed. I thought we were, really, really just not looked upon the way we should have been, right? If we are a 7 seed, John, I really believe we're in the Sweet 16 at worst. So, yeah, I think college basketball's changed, right? This is really pro basketball. Anybody that says it's not, it is. But you still have to get a degree. You still have to value education. You still have to be part of a campus community, right? Those are the different things. But this has turned to a pro model. You can't complain about it. You have to adapt to it. Too many coaches complain about it, but there's just a lot of variables, right? And I think that was kind of the final chapter to say, hey, this game has certainly changed at the mid-major level.
All right, welcome back to Inside College Basketball Now with John Rothstein here on CBS Sports Network. Want to remind you, subscribe to Inside College Basketball Now on both Apple and Spotify. We want to be your Bible for your college basketball season and beyond. We are the only college basketball podcast coming to you 52 weeks out of the calendar year. Also want to remind you to hit the like and subscribe button on YouTube. We want to get up to 500 likes on this show. And also hit the hype button so we can obviously build the hype surrounding Inside College Basketball Now from coast to coast like butter and toast. So now what we're going to do is a special interaction portion of Inside College Basketball Now. Each and every Sunday, I am going to put on my Twitter a message out to you, the college basketball fan, to send me your questions, and I will answer them right here. So without further ado, let's look and see what's in the hot hopper right now. I got some news right here. Well, we got some breaking news. Jalen Lowe, Kentucky transfer, is heading to Georgetown. Before I answer this question. So bear with me right now while I get the tweet out. This is the transfer portal world right now. Not anarchy. It's just college basketball in April. But I'm going to get to this question in a second. Okay. If you had to pick a Final Four right now for next year, who are your 4 teams? Well, look, I can't do that yet because rosters are still being set. But with that said, I love what Illinois has done. I moved Illinois into my top 3, and obviously Michigan and Florida are in those positions as well. I currently still have Michigan with Adai Mara and Merez Johnson up front. J.P. Estrella's addition could obviously change that a little bit. But for all intents and purposes, I think Michigan, Illinois, and Florida, to me, on paper right now, look like the 3 best rosters. And I would then go to probably Michigan State in the 4 spot with Jeremy Fears back. Let's take a look at the next one right now. What will UNC's record be after Mike Malone's first season? How far will they go in March? There is absolutely no possible way to answer that without the scenario of knowing who is going to be on North Carolina's roster. I talked earlier about North Carolina's interest in both Jalen Haralson and Neoklis Avdalas. I can also add that North Carolina is pursuing, Juke Harris from Wake Forest. And also, one thing we have to remember, there are still good players to retain in North Carolina's program. Henry Vestar still in the program. We don't have any affirmation yet on what he's going to do next year. You could say the same thing about Jaron Stevenson. So this is all stuff to keep an eye on here moving forward. Let's take a look at the next slide. John Bernadette says, do you think Louisville will win the ACC after getting Badunga? Well, look, Louisville has a nice nucleus right now with Shellstad, Badunga, and also Adrian Woolley. I mean, look, Badunga was on a Kansas team last year that had Darren Peterson and a number of other good players, and they didn't get to the Sweet 16. So I would pause right now if I would jump to any conclusion just because Louisville got floored Badunga. Next slide, please. Quamaine Mitchell fan club. This is a Missouri-based question. What is St. Louis and Missouri's ceiling next year? I have St. Louis right now in my top 25. A number of players back from last year's team that won a game in the NCAA tournament. Missouri is in the top 35. Missouri, though, obviously with a terrific freshman class coming in led by Jason Crow. But I will say this. Missouri, to me, is a team, for all intents and purposes, that needs to add a couple more pieces in the portal, as does everybody. And St. Louis is a team, to me, that, again, could use another post player to replace Robbie Avila. Next slide, please. John, what are your thoughts on Aberdeen returning to the Gators? And do you think it's a good or bad thing for college basketball, or is it neither? Some people are overreacting. This is just what college basketball is right now. College basketball is a sport where there is no salary cap and there is unlimited movement. Now, will some of the federal requests that, were pitched a couple of weeks ago be put into place and change that? Time will tell. But this is the way the sport is right now. There's going to be constant movement. Rosters are always in flux. But I think it's important to point out, we sometimes celebrate news and information like it is gospel just because a player is changing teams, and obviously in a situation where he is going to a certain team. I am not so certain that for all intents and purposes we are necessarily going to see the teams with the highest volume be in a situation where they are obviously going to be the most successful team. Let's take another question. Jason Down says, John, can Nebraska continue its momentum to another tournament run next year? I think it's very possible. Look, Price Sandford is the key in this whole thing, but if Fred Hoiberg can get back Price Sandford, he's gotten back Braden Frager, and he can also keep, obviously, Connor Essegian healthy, that's a perimeter at Nebraska that might be good enough to, again, be a team that gets into the NCAA tournament for the second straight year. Roll in another one here. Will 26-27 be Altman's final season at Oregon? Well, look, time will tell on that. Dana Altman is a guy who has said that as long as he can coach, at Oregon, he wants to coach. I don't think he's somebody who's rushing to be retired with nothing to do. So, Dana Altman's trying to put a good roster together. He obviously has Taj Ariza coming in. He just got a commitment from Tyrone Riley over the weekend and Farrell Compton over the weekend, but there is more work to be done for the Ducks. But I would not expect Dana Altman, who led Oregon to a Final Four and built one of the most consistent programs on the West Coast, to want to end his career this way. One more before the break. What did Ryan Odom put in the water in Charlottesville where everyone is coming back? Well, look, Virginia had a great program in place where Virginia had a program, again, that went to the round of 32 of the NCAA tournament, won 30 games. And those guys are all going to be well-resourced and well-compensated. Chance Mallory, Johan Grunlow, Testa Ritter. So Virginia's got the pieces in place, in my opinion, throw Sam Lewis in there as well, to be a top 10 team to start next season. We'll put a bow on this show when we return with some news and notes from around the world of college basketball. John Rothstein here on Inside College Basketball Now on CBS Sports Network. All right, John Rothstein back here on Inside College Basketball Now on CBS Sports Network. We're going to put a bow on this show with some news and notes from around the world of college hoops. Nugget number one, Desert Storm. This is a big-time non-conference game set up for next season on December 19th in Palm Springs. Michigan State is going to play Gonzaga at Acrisure Arena. Both head coaches in this game, two Hall of Famers, Tom Izzo and Mark Few will be honored. So that's December 19th, Michigan State and Gonzaga in Palm Springs. Meanwhile, nugget number 2, a new dawn for the West Coast Conference. UC Santa Barbara is going to join the WCC for the 27-28 season. This is a great addition, in my opinion, for the West Coast Conference. Post-Gonzaga, the league is going to obviously go up to 12 teams with the additions of UC San Diego and also Denver and UC Santa Barbara. So it's up to 12 teams in 27-28. Going to be a fascinating league moving forward, post-Gonzaga and obviously with Randy Bennett now at Arizona State. Nugget number 3, a date to remember. This is the NBA's early entry withdrawal, or the NCAA's early entry withdrawal deadline for the 2026 NBA draft. That is going to be May 27th at 11:59 p.m. Eastern. That is the last day that underclassmen can withdraw from the NBA draft and return to college basketball and retain their college eligibility. There's obviously a lot of different guys right now who are going to go through the NBA draft process and be in a situation where they are going to see if they can stay in the NBA draft or then potentially go back to college. A couple obviously already on the board. Iowa State's Milan Momcilovic, who on Sunday also entered the transfer portal. That gives him a little bit of flexibility. And there's also other players that we will monitor between now and then. And look, it is April 13th as we're taping the show. That is 6 weeks away. And the biggest thing I'm taking from a lot of college coaches is, rather than be in a situation where they are going to wait for a player until the end of May, they would much rather take a bird in hand now and be in a situation where they know they have a player rather than wait another 6 weeks to see if somebody obviously can come back. That is one major benefit of the transfer portal, something that did not exist prior, obviously, to the transfer portal. Because when you didn't have the transfer portal, you were literally at the mercy of somebody making a decision, and then you might not be able to be in a situation where you could recalibrate your roster so quickly. A couple of last-minute notes and news right now that just came in my feed the last 15 minutes. Oregon transfer Kwame Evans has announced a commitment to Villanova. Meanwhile, as I was tweeting out during the last segment, Kentucky transfer Jalen Lowe is committed to Georgetown, according to his father. So that gives Ed Cooley his point guard in place. And also, one I just got, according to a source, Gonzaga transfer Emmanuel Innocenti has committed to Arizona State to play for Randy Bennett. So that's a nice building block for Randy Bennett at Arizona State. We hope to visit with him in the near future on this show. So a lot of different things moving around right now in the transfer portal. Want to, again, go back to some of the headlines I talked about early, some stuff that's going to be happening in the next couple of days. Starting today, BYU transfer Rob Wright is going to visit Kentucky. Tyron Stokes also on campus for the Wildcats. So a lot could be happening at Kentucky over the next 24 to 48 hours. John Blackwell, the best guard in the transfer portal, will visit UCLA on Tuesday. Jalen Petty from Texas Tech committed to the Bruins on Sunday night. So UCLA now stockpiling that perimeter. Also, one thing to keep in mind, Todd Ramazar, the agent for John Blackwell, is a UCLA alum. Duke and Illinois also expected to be at the top of John Blackwell's list. Illinois did take a commitment on Sunday from Providence transfer Stefan Vox. And then Neo Avdalas, the Virginia Tech transfer, not taking any official visits. A couple of schools to keep an eye on in this chase: North Carolina, St. John's, Arkansas. Want to remind you too, later this afternoon on YouTube, you will be able to hear and you'll be able to watch, obviously, my full episode with Michigan's Dusty May. We played part of that interview on this show. It's going to be a big interview, obviously, on everything that went to the national title run and what looks in the future for Michigan basketball. We need an army with us for each and every show here on Inside College Basketball Now, and we need you to be all you can be to be a part of that army. Subscribe to us on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. We will be here, same bat time, same bat channel, next Monday, 1 o'clock Eastern on CBS Sports Network. This was Inside College Basketball with John Rothstein. Inside College Basketball Now with John Rothstein. We do indeed sleep in May.